Well, when we enter a higher learning, when we enter college campuses, it's expected, I think, in the past that we would all be able to kind of grow our voices and learn more about ourselves and the world around us. And the way we do that has traditionally in American history been through open debate with each other. But a new study finds, and I think this is not going to surprise many of you listening, that trend is decreasing here in America. And a new study points out just how much free speech on college campuses is being restricted. So joining me to talk about a new study from the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression is Senior Research Fellow Sean Stevens. Sean, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So first of all, before we get into the details of your report, can you just tell us a little bit about the methodology that you use in order to rank these different schools and to determine which schools are more open to debate and discussion?
Yeah, so we partner with a survey company, College Pulse. They are able to identify which responses come from which campuses, which is kind of key for us to do the rankings. One thing you'll see with a lot of other surveys of college students, which do find similar results, is that they're national samples. You don't necessarily know what schools they are from, the students are from. I've run some of these myself without the ability to be fully confident that the responses are coming from a campus. Like, you're basically left to asking them what college they attend, and I'm not doubting most of them tell the truth, but I'm sure there are some that are inaccurate. So we partner with College Pulse because they're able to do that. They, like a very well-run survey company like Pew, et cetera, they not only have a large panel of college students. It's about close to 650,000 now. It also includes some recent college graduates. But they also apply a number of weights and ways of kind of standardizing the samples that you get based on IPEDS data, based on current population survey data, things like that. So fairly confident that even though it's not a completely random sample because it's an app and it's an opt-in, that when you apply these weights, you're at least getting very close to what the college population in the country looks like in terms of the national sample. We also do this for the individual colleges.
Okay.
Then in terms of the rankings, what we do is, we have a survey battery of about 25, 30 questions. Our goal with it is to make it into something kind of like the general social survey, where we ask it every year, and there'll be a core set of questions that are always asked, and then there's probably something like 5 or 10 that you rotate some in, you rotate some out, you try some new things, this or that. So not all of the questions are part of the component that make up the overall score, but the majority of them are, and most of them were asked in 2021.
And so the idea then is to be able to track this over time and see
Yes.
whether this is increasing or decreasing.
Yeah, so it's there's multiple goals here. There's the goal of ranking the schools and providing parents, students, prospective students, current students, even faculty, if they're interested, a way of evaluating their campuses and comparing it to others. But then in terms of a research goal, we love to just have the ability to track trends over time on this.
Now, you say this is the largest survey on student-free expression ever conducted, 45,000 student voices from all over the country at different colleges. Can you tell us which schools, according to your results, came out as having the best environment for free speech?
Yeah, so that little nugget is true of each one we've run. We've done this in 2020, 2021, 2022, and each year we've increased the size and the scope and the number of schools we've surveyed. So this year, as in previous years, the University of Chicago ranked very highly. This is the second out of 3 years that they were number one. We'll point out that they still certainly have fairly big enough room for improvement. Our scores go from 0 to 100. They have a 77.92, so roughly a 78. We'd rate that speech climate as good. But if they were above 90, we would consider that exceptional. Effectively. Other schools that did well were Purdue University, also did well last year, Kansas State University, which has done well in our rankings the previous 2 years, Mississippi State, Oklahoma State, and Claremont McKenna was number 6 this year. They were number 1 last year. Remain the top ranked liberal arts school. I will note there has been kind of a recent controversy on that campus, and we did begin to start factoring in attempts to sanction scholars this year based on our Scholars Under Fire database.
Okay.
We also included disinvitation attempts. And we did that for the last 4 years, so from 2019 to present. But given that we had to start writing the report and didn't want things to change after that, we set a deadline of July 1st, 2022. So that incident occurred afterwards. But if it makes it into our Scholars Under Fire database, it would be incorporated into their score next year.
Just for people who aren't into knowing what it is, what was that incident?
So there's been a recent controversy at Claremont McKenna where one professor has written multiple op-eds, basically saying that they've disciplined him for his pedagogical use of, quoting Baldwin, et cetera, quoting things like Martin Luther King, but using, racial slurs in class in the full slur and not, abbreviating it or censoring it. This is like a long-running kind of debate, I think, that's been going on over the last few years over whether this is pedagogically acceptable or not anymore. Supposedly there were two other professors that maybe were also impacted by this. So that's kind of the controversy. And we see how that plays out. And like I said, if that makes it into our Scholars Under Fire database, it would then be incorporated into their score next year.
All right. So where is speech being most restricted?
Yeah, so in last we have Columbia University. And so this kind of score was, they have 9.91, so they're rated fairly low. That would be an abysmal rating based on our kind of speech climate classifications. And they're down there for a couple of reasons. Interestingly, I will point out they actually do well on we have a number of components that make up the overall score. I got a little sidetracked off that at the beginning. Sorry, I was explaining the weighting and the sampling, which is also important. But so one of these components is political tolerance, and we assess that in kind of the classic way by asking tolerance for speakers that are offensive. And so we ask about for liberal speakers, for conservative speakers. The idea is they're offensive to the other side. And they're supposed to be, because that's the way you measure tolerance. Right. Surprisingly, Columbia actually does pretty well on this component. Like they're very tolerant of liberal speakers, but also relative to most of the other schools, they're fairly tolerant of conservative speakers. Okay. They have a big bias. We factor in the difference as well between the two. But that component that's not why they do poorly, actually. It's not like, oh, they're super biased against the conservative speakers. The main reason they get punished a lot there were a number of scholars sanctioned over the past 4 years. And so there's a number of entries from Columbia University that show up in our Scholars Under Fire database. So that's one reason. And then other reasons, I just want to quickly switch over to my sheet.
Yeah.
No, but so they do, their administration is perceived as kind of, fairly strong on free speech, but then there's things like on openness, in terms of discussing controversial topics, and support for disruptive conduct, which is things like shout downs, blocking entry, and even potentially students using violence to stop a speaker or speech event. They don't do as well on.
So Columbia ranks the worst. What are some of the other schools that you have listed there?
Yeah, so some of the other ones at the bottom are UPenn. They also have punishments from mainly from Scholars Under Fire. They have a number of punishments from that. We'll note that a number of those incidents include controversial Professor Amy Wax, who has been in the news a lot in like the last 4 years for basically comments about affirmative action, inequality, etc., op-ed pieces, and comments about her students. So that's one aspect of it. But like Columbia, they also do badly on things like disruptive conduct, openness, comfort expressing ideas. And so this is a component where we ask students how comfortable they are expressing their views in different contexts on campus. So it could be in a written assignment, it could be in the classroom, it could be in the quad or the dining hall, social media.
So a feeling that they have to self-censor themselves.
Yeah, that's one of the ways we kind of get at it. We also kind of more directly ask about self-censorship with a few other questions, where we ask if they've ever, not expressed their views because of how people on campus would respond, like students, faculty, or the administration. And then this year we added questions about how worried about your reputation being damaged because someone misinterprets something you said or did,
Hmm.
and do you feel pressure to not express certain views in the classroom.
Okay.
So we added a few more questions to try to get at this. So other schools that do poorly, RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which I'll note has a lifetime censorship award from Fire.
My goodness.
That was,
They're
well,
overachieving.
a few years ago, but yeah, so they might be they're already overachieving, I guess. Georgetown University, Skidmore College rounded out the bottom five. Yale and Northwestern were kind of right outside this as well.
Okay. I want to get into a little bit more about your findings on students who feel they need to be restrained or they have to self-censor. What group of students felt or responded to your questionnaire, the questionnaire, that felt like they were the ones that had to be most self-restrained, that they couldn't freely share their views?
So, I mean, like I said, we ask about it in different ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so on the direct questions where we kind of ask about self-censorship, like clear, predictable political divisions emerged where, and I would actually say it's kind of a very like linear progression almost, in broadly,
Yeah.
like not campus to campus, it might be different, but as you come in from like left, like
Mm-hmm.
very progressive left, and you're even students who would identify as liberal but aren't as quote left and maybe
Yeah.
close to the center, you start seeing self-censorship start to rise, and then it is higher in more moderate and politically conservative students. And we did get about something like about 1,000 or so libertarians in the sample as well. So you get that, but you also do get democratic socialists saying my views are too left for people and I can't like I can't
Yeah.
say them. So it seems to affect each group, but yeah, it trends in a predictably political direction
Yeah.
based on what other studies have found in the past. But then I think when you look at some of the other ways we ask about self-censorship, like on certain topics,
Mm.
like a topic like some racial topics, like we ask about racial inequality or affirmative action, or we ask about abortion, like how difficult it is to have open and honest conversations about these. You see different
Yeah.
demographic groups predictably being
Yeah.
like, oh, I find these more difficult to discuss, etc. So I think what I want to hit on like broadly is you can find students in almost every category, notable portions in almost every category, that will say they have a difficulty expressing views on certain things on campus.
And I guess the bottom line for all this is where is the line between controversial speech, where people should be allowed, that you may be on ideologically different sides of things, but you're discussing issues and they're very important and people take them very personally, and that's understandable. But to be able to have a conversation, and I personally think it's good if you're on one side of the ideological spectrum to hear from the other side, to hear from exactly what they have to say. So whether you're a conservative, to listen to liberals listen to conservatives and have that conversation. But where does the line get drawn between having a spirited conversation on a controversial topic and say like hate speech? I mean, and I think that's, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like there's some difficulty trying to find where that dividing line is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's largely for each individual is in effect in the eye of the beholder,
Right.
right? And
Right.
that's a broader philosophical question, and it's one of the arguments for why you don't have really any restrictions on this.
Mm-hmm.
So on that issue, on that more narrow issue, though, a college campus, especially a classroom with a pretty informed professor and/or graduate student leading the class or leading the discussion. You would hope that that's actually a space where we could explore these things,
Yeah.
and not have what's become a kind of fairly common knee-jerk reaction we see outside campus when people kind of discuss these issues and disagree with each other. You hope you could probe like a little deeper there, and on that, it's like I think professors, administrators can do perhaps a better job of modeling how to do that, and maybe moderating some of these conversations.
Yeah.
Again, I have plenty of experience teaching in a classroom. I have a PhD. I did a postdoc. I worked at universities for a long time.
Yeah.
Taught plenty of classes. I have
Yeah.
not been in the classroom in quite a while. So,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it's necessarily like today. And of course, every classroom is different. A 20-person lecture,
Yeah.
small lecture class is much different from a 400-person class.
Yeah.
And the way people are going to feel comfortable expressing themselves. But I think there's a conversation to kind of be had there. Um, as I mentioned, as an academic, as a social political psychologist, one thing I do think has occurred, and I think people should be reasonably concerned about is this idea of concept creep, where,
Mm.
you know, X amount of years ago, it was clear. It's like, okay, these are the slurs and kind of like the hateful things.
Yeah.
And do your best to avoid those, probably. And now that the domain seems to be expanding and
Mm.
expanding in some ways quickly, and people might not even know
Yeah.
that certain things they're saying maybe fall in this expanded domain for somebody else.
Right.
And so I think that's something to be concerned about, and it's reasonable to kind of have those concerns. And that's something where I think it falls more on like faculty, professors, grad
Yeah.
students, administrators, to try to navigate those waters with undergraduate students.
And facilitate,
Yeah,
ways to discuss these different things too.
yeah.
Sean, if people want to find out more about the study, where can they go to do that?
They can go to thefire.org. It's pasted on the main page right now. You'll be able to download the report. You'll be able to see the rankings, kind of explore them. The dashboard allows you to compare schools with each other, gives you more details on individual schools. And you can also explore the data in more detail. And it's also, if anyone's really interested in the raw data file, it's available upon request. You can email data@thefire.org.
Well, I think this is a really important topic, so everybody make sure you check it out. Senior Research Fellow from the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, Sean Stevens, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks.